Well, it's time to fix dinner, and today I had a couple requests for meatloaf and a couple for Salisbury steak, but we had meatloaf 4 nights ago, and Eddie's eating meatloaf sandwiches this week, so he's kind of tired of meatloaf, so I thought I'd do Salisbury steak tonight. So the first thing I'm going to do is I've got 2 pounds of ground chuck in my bowl. And the recipe actually just called for 1.5 pounds, but I'm gonna make some so that I can freeze it after we've eaten on it. So to that 2 pounds of ground chuck, I'm gonna add half of a big onion. I didn't have a medium-sized onion, so I just split a big one. And so I'm gonna add the onion. Get it mixed in there. You don't want big pockets of onion. And then I'm going to add half a cup of breadcrumbs. Let me grab a measuring cup. So this is a cup measure, so we're going to add just a half a cup of breadcrumbs to the hamburger. And this is the breadcrumbs I used in the meatloaf, and I always date them when I open it. Breadcrumbs don't really go bad because they're dried, but they do go stale. So I always date it so I know how long it's been opened. So we'll add the breadcrumbs in and mix it up just a little bit. Now this recipe calls for 1 egg, but since I've got 2 pounds of ground chuck and these eggs are kind of small, I'm going to add 2 eggs. All right, and now it's time for Worcestershire sauce. I use Worcestershire sauce in a lot of stuff. And I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons. So that's 2 pounds of ground chuck, half of a large onion, a half a cup of breadcrumbs, and then 2 eggs. And now I'm just going to add a little bit of salt and pepper. And you can mix this up with your hands if you want to. It doesn't make any difference. But we are going to use our hands to patty it out, so. Nothing works as good as hands, so let's just get in there. See some breadcrumbs that haven't gotten mixed in yet. All right, let me heat my pan up. Now I'm not using cast iron today because this is going to make more patties than will fit in my cast iron at one time. So I'm using my big stainless steel skillet. So we'll get it heating up. You can make these patties any size you want. That's about the size that Eddie would eat, so we'll make them about that size. And remember, this is hamburger. It's got some fat in it, so you don't need any oil in the pan, and they're going to shrink a little bit when they cook. We'll have grandsons tonight, so I'll make them a couple of little ones. That's going to be a pan full. But if you don't eat it all, it does freeze well. So I'll either freeze the rest of it, or I will send it to somebody else to eat. I don't want that big onion in there. All right, I've got them in my pan. Slide them around a little bit so they've got room to cook. And after they brown on one side, we'll be back. Okay, I'm back, and our Salisbury steak patties have browned, and I went ahead and flipped them over and browned them on the other side. And I poured a little bit of grease off of them. There wasn't a whole lot of grease because that was 80-20 ground chuck, so there's not a whole lot of extra fat in it. But I went ahead and poured the extra grease off. And now in this cup, we have a quart of beef stock. You can use the canned beef consomme, which I actually like better. You find it in the soup aisle, but I couldn't find any this time. But I've used beef stock before, and it works just fine. And a quarter cup of cornstarch. Now remember, you always add cornstarch to cold liquid. So I'm going to add this to that beef stock before I put it in there. See how it turns kind of a cloudy color? All right, now we're just going to pour it in the pan. And I take the spatula and move them around just a little bit to make sure they're not sticking. And those are doing great. Now these patties don't have to be all the way done when you add that liquid, because they're gonna simmer for another 30 minutes, so they'll finish cooking. So now I've had it on medium heat all this time, so now we're just gonna turn it down to about 3. I'm gonna put the lid on the pan, and we're gonna simmer it for at least 30 minutes. Well, it's been 30 minutes, and our Salisbury steak is done. I checked it with a meat thermometer. Remember, I told you I always use a meat thermometer on ground meat. It has to be up to 160 degrees before I consider it safe. So, I checked it with the meat thermometer, and it's done. Let me see if I can get it over here where you can see it a little bit better. Okay, and it's just bubbling away, and our patties are good and firm. They're good and brown. That's where a lot of that flavor comes from. But with that cornstarch and beef stock, look how the beef stock has thickened up and made this really good gravy. That is going to be good. And we are having some mashed potatoes with it. I've got a pot of potatoes cooked over here. And Eddie likes just plain old pork and beans with any kind of meat like this that's got a gravy and mashed potatoes. He loves pork and beans with it. So we're just going to open a can of pork and beans. That's going to be really easy. So I hope you'll try that sometime. And afterwards, if we're still hungry, we might have a homemade pumpkin muffin.